time to do a deep dive into No Man's Sky and Starfield and make some comparisons, work out what they have in common and what they don't have in common. Now there's a list of things where both games share certain features, missions, exploration and guilds being one of them. The missions in No Man's Sky case and the guilds tend to be go to a guy, click on a mission, select it, go and do it, come back. That's it. I would expect Bethesda's ones to be a little bit more deep and meaningful than that. So whilst they both contain that kind of thing, Bethesda's have been more scripted and voice acted, whereas No Man's Skies tend to be more text based, which means you could have more missions that take up less resources, they're much more easier to generate and therefore can be done in a procedural world much more easily, where Bethesda's might get a bit old after a while because you end up doing the same missions over and over again, like you do in all Bethesda's games. Combat pirates and sentinels are another area where it'd be different. Combat in space, that's going to be a different area, but let's just talk about combat on the ground. Combat on the ground with pirate bases and sentinels, they're two different things, because No Man's Sky isn't really a game that's based on combat. It's based on exploration. You go and explore places, find things. It's very grindy. You're grinding your way up, trying to upgrade. Like you buy a ship and you go and upgrade the ship, and then you buy a new ship, and next one up. You do the same thing again to the next one up, and then you upgrade again to another ship, and you upgrade. It's constantly repeating yourself. With combat and stuff like that, it's the same. You get sentinels respawning and respawning. It's a bit of a grind with No Man's Sky, not really the primary focus of the game. Whereas with Starfield, it will be. You know, there's combat against things in a kind of Quake, Unreal, Call of Duty kind of way. So I would expect Bethesda to be more of an interesting shoot 'em up than, say, No Man's Sky was. Especially when it comes to Sentinels, because Sentinels are just basically the same. You do get giant robots and stuff, but we know the waves, we know they're coming, we know when the big ones are going to appear. I don't think you're going to get that feeling with Starfield the first time you play it. You might the second time you play it, but not the first time. Plus, if they do what they normally do, they will usually have level lists, so it'll change according to the level you're on when you enter something for the first time. Spaceflight and spaceships and upgrades, both games have that. We can't possibly know, how much difference there's going to be between one and the other until we actually see it. But both games have all of those things, and both games will feature combat in space. We'll have to see which ones work out to be the best after Starfield's release, though. Space stations, bases, NPCs and research, again, both games have all of those things. You can research things in No Man's Sky, you can research things in Starfield. So yeah, it's the NPCs and what they have to say to you are going to make a bit of a difference. In No Man's Sky, again, it's text based, allowing you to have lots more lines, more random, more procedurally generated, whereas in Bethesda's games it's going to be more predictable, after you played it through the first time. No Man's Sky doesn't have that problem, because No Man's Sky plays a little bit differently every time you play it. Even the universe changes. Planets, mining and wildlife, both games have that. We've seen it in the videos. So No Man's Sky has had many years to perfect its planets and its wildlife and its mining, and it has done over the years. It's changed dramatically. I wouldn't expect Bethesda's game to be as detailed as No Man's Sky in that area, but both games certainly have those features. Locations to explore. No Man's Sky's locations, they tend to be a little bit on the simplistic side. You go into a room or up a ladder, click on something, job's done, return to wherever you came from. I don't think we're going to get that kind of simplicity from Bethesda's games. I think you're going to get like dungeons, caves kind of thing we see in Skyrim, Skyrim, Oblivion and Fallout. I think that's going to be the order of the day. And instead of walking down a path to actually get to the locations, you're flying through space and being attacked. Although I dare say there'll probably be certain encounters on the ground as well. Bethesda use level lists, so the creatures that spawn, or the pirates that spawn, are leveled with you usually. So if they do that again, that'll be another difference between No Man's Sky and everything else. Because in No Man's Sky, they don't really level with you; they stay the same because you don't level. Because it's just the way No Man's Sky works. Storyline wise, both games are going to have a story, right? So I mean, they do have a story. It says that No Man's Sky tends to be delivered a little bit more. It's kind of like a little piece at a time, if you understand me. It's not delivered all in one go or as a speech. You get fed little bits. So the different stories, you've got to play one game quite a long time to get anywhere. Whereas with Bethesda's games, I would expect one single playthrough. You in a day, when you know the game, you could probably play through the whole plot. You can't do that with No Man's Sky. It takes far too long to uncover the plot elements, and you've got to uncover language barriers. Get past the Gek and the Valkyrie and all the other languages in order to understand what they're telling you, and then you start to realise that you've been here before. You are an iteration of yourself. You've done it before, you'll do it again. And some of the iterations remember you from the previous playthroughs. They remember that you done this before, and whether you know them or not depends on whether they met you in the past or the future, because they may remember you but you may not remember them, and vice versa. So it's a really deep sci-fi game, is No Man's Sky. It really has that going for it, whereas I think Bethesda's Starfield is probably going to be a little bit more generic, a little bit less fanciful. But that's the difference between Bethesda's coined phrase hard sci-fi and pure sci-fi. Pure sci-fi can take you anywhere. Now, what don't they have in common? Well, RPG elements. There are no RPG elements in No Man's Sky. So the second you want to level up your character, make a decision whether your character is going to be good at shooting or technology, you're automatically doing something No Man's Sky can't handle. So that's one very big element where Starfield's going to be very, very different from No Man's Sky, and it is a big element. It's a game-changing element. If you added that kind of RPG to Starfield, it'd be a very different game. So it's not going to be comparable for that reason alone. Detailed cities. Starfield's going to have detailed cities, but No Man's Sky has none of that. It doesn't even come close to having that kind of detail in the game. And we know the kind of cities Bethesda make. We've seen them, says in Fallout, we've seen them in Skyrim, in Oblivion, Morrowind. If we just imagine that again, we can understand the difference. In No Man's Sky, you might get a settlement where you get to build it up. That's the closest thing to a city you're going to see. You're not going to see anything deep and meaningful beyond that. Combat focused game. Like I said in the Combat Pirates and Sentinels section, right, it says Bethesda's games are going to be more combat focused both in space and on the ground. It says No Man's Sky isn't a combat focused game, it's an exploration focused game. In the exploration stakes, it's very grindy, and you've got to go so many places and uncover wormholes and, well, not wormholes, black holes you can fly through and things like that, and mine resources to make goods which allow you to travel further or to distant stars because you need a special type of drive. This is where No Man's Sky shines. It's not where Bethesda's game's going to shine. Bethesda's game's going to be more RPG and combat. Says I think there'd be elements of exploration in it, but I'd be doubtful if it comes close to No Man's Sky, because No Man's Sky's entire gameplay is about exploration, and you're rewarded for doing it in No Man's Sky. So the combat system is where Starfield's going to shine. Says whereas exploration is where No Man's Sky's going to shine. Detailed guilds. No Man's Sky just has a guy behind a desk. That's it, right? Bethesda have never done that. They've always made their guilds more detailed. You can walk around, get to know members of the guild, do little missions for them. It all adds up. It makes a difference. It also gives you a way of practicing your skills a little bit, maybe getting a bit of training. These are all things, that you get to do in Bethesda's games, which you do not get to do in No Man's Sky. Says, and so I don't think it's even going to be worth comparing the two, because Bethesda do this really well usually, especially if you like Thieves Guild or Assassin's Guilds. They're really good at those particular guilds. So yeah. Now, realism versus pure sci-fi. This is a big topic. Bethesda have coined the phrase hard science fiction, which means current technology, you know, as envisioned in the future, right? So it's not really a deep dive into science fiction, it's more of a cheap sci-fi. I can't believe it's sci-fi, you know, light sci-fi, you know, not hard sci-fi. Take NASA, stick it 200 years in the future, you've got hard sci-fi. You know, whereas you'd have to go quite substantially further in the future to have Dune, Star Wars or anything like that. So pure sci-fi is Dune, it's Star Wars. You know, kind of hard sci-fi, that would be Firefly. That's the difference that as I see it. Now, No Man's Sky, they feed you plot things and bits of information a little bit at a time. For instance, if you get like one line of dialogue in a Bethesda game, the chances are you've got all the information in that dialogue. Whereas in No Man's Sky, you might have to do 6 missions before you get that whole sentence worked out. And you also, like I said previously, you have to understand the language, so you have to grind a little bit to, you know, learn words for each language so you can understand what they're saying to you. And only when you truly understand will you find it, you understand what the plot line is, or understand what each race means. For instance, the Valkyrie, they're kind of be more in kind of destroying all weapons in the universe, so then they can go back to a peaceful life. The Gek are more traders, and the others, they tend to be more technology based, and they're more keen on Atlas than anything else. You learn this as you go through the game. You also learn about the iterations through these races and monoliths and things like that. How you can live your same life several different times. The whole game plotline unveils this to you slowly over time. And when you get to the end, you get a choice. And I've done this before. Do you reset the universe and start a new iteration, or do you carry on with the universe knowing it will end one day? So the plotline is very complex in No Man's Sky. Says, whereas when you're talking about a realistic line of thing, you go up to a guild, they set you a mission, you go and do the mission. After you've done so many missions, you know, the main quest is over. That's it. Job's a good one. And that is roughly the difference between pure sci-fi and realism. Realism doesn't really let you give you much scope, where pure sci-fi you could just add Godzilla into the mix anytime you like and you could get away with it. The Japanese are very good at understanding this basic concept, and they've done it many times. Manga is just a shining example of what I'm talking about here. And if you look at Akira, the kind of motorbikes in Akira, they're starting to become a thing. You know, so pure sci-fi is turning into reality, whereas hard sci-fi is just what we know today with a laser gun attached. So yeah. Anyway, so I do think Starfield's going to stand out on its own. I don't think once it's released it'll be directly comparable to No Man's Sky, but I do think right now it's easy to compare the two because they do contain a lot of elements that both share, as I've explained. But once a game comes out, once you get in the RPG side of things, it's going to feel different. Very different. Anyway, like, subscribe, let me know what you thought about the video, and I will see you in the next one.